Yeah, there you go. The revolution will be televised. Well, the revolution is being televised right here, right now on UK Live. If you're watching this and you haven't already subscribed, please make sure you do so, so that then you'll get all the clips that come out of this extravaganza of ours. That is the show that follows Mike Graham from 10 till 12. So 25 minutes left. It's 11:35. Going to go to Sean Walsh now. Sean, you're described as a freelance writer and former academic, and specifically on the Pope and AI. How do those two subjects go together, sir?
Okay. I promised Charlotte I'd try and make this interesting and funny. So
Let's make it
here
light.
goes. Just make it light. Okay, no worries. Yeah, I'm a writer on all sorts of stuff, including Catholic stuff and theology and philosophy of mind and philosophy of artificial intelligence. My PhD was in the philosophy of artificial intelligence, and I'm a practicing Catholic. So recently, Pope Leo wrote an encyclical called Magnifica Humanitas, an encyclical being a letter to the whole of the Church, in which he promised that he would tackle the threat posed by artificial intelligence, especially generative artificial intelligence, the very sophisticated AI that we have now, to human dignity. I argued in an article for the Conservative Woman that he didn't really meet his own test there, and that it was almost like he was trying to hang out with the AI geeks in Silicon Valley and court favor with them, and missed an opportunity to address the threat that AI poses from the perspective of a distinctive Catholic theology. I don't think he did it, but at least he has drawn attention to the threat of artificial intelligence. And I've elsewhere argued that the threat of artificial intelligence is not what you think it is. The threat is not that machines are going to be conscious, it's that we are going to treat them as if they are, and thereby end up treating ourselves as machines. So that's what that article was about. But I was hoping, Russell, you were going to tee me up with the question of, is the Pope a Catholic? And I was going to come back in.
Is that a very short answer? Unless you're going to reveal something very explosive that maybe, I don't know, has the Pope converted to Islam?
Well, obviously, it's trivially true that the Pope is a Catholic, but the Pope has been saying some stuff recently which is brilliant from the point of view of traditional Catholicism, and some which is worrying because some of the things he's been saying, particularly on the issue of just war theory and migration, are not. And on the case of just war theory, it's not consistent with what's written in the Catechism of the Catholic Church. And in the case of migration, it's very selective about what's written in the Catechism.
What's he saying specifically that you don't agree with, Sean?
On which issue? On the issue of just
both.
war theory?
Well, yeah, just war,
Okay.
and particularly immigration. Look, immigration in the West, I think, is the biggest challenge of our time. So, I mean, but mostly the Church are kind of, they're almost like a Care for Calais extension, aren't they? It's just, well, you know, all refugees are welcome, right?
Yeah, I'll focus on migration then, because it ties up with this trip he's just had to Spain. Now, the Pope has done some brilliant stuff. One of the things he's been doing is to reassert that Catholicism is a supernatural faith, that we do not believe that we believe in strange things. And one of the things that the Pope did was a Eucharistic adoration, we call it. He proceeded with the host of our Lord through the streets of Spain, too much adulation, giving people the opportunity to adore our Lord in the host, if I can put it like that. So that side of it, brilliant. But he gave a speech to the great and the good in the Spanish Parliament, who I think are probably basically a bunch of commies, in which he said some really good Catholic things about the dignity of life. He said that life begins at conception and needs to be valued right up to the end of the point of natural death, to which they sat somewhat stony-faced. But he's also been making some comments about migration. Now, the comments he's been making are basically, as you said, that nations have an obligation to welcome the stranger, to welcome people who come here to work if they can't work in their own homes, in their own homelands. What he has failed, and he, you know, that is written in the Catechism of the Catholic Church that we should be obliged to do that. But what he did not mention was that migrants themselves come with obligations of integration, which is to say that host nations, the nations that take the migrants in, have rights themselves. And one of those rights include the preservation of their own traditions and, in particular, their own legal systems. And it is part of Catholic doctrine that migrants who are welcomed into countries are obliged to carry the burden of those countries in those respects. So they can't come here and set up parallel systems of law, for example,
Which they do in Britain. And we hear
which they
lots
do
and
in
lots,
Britain.
Sean, about the fact that there are many communities within Britain, particularly in
Yeah,
certain cities in Britain, the likes of London and Birmingham and Bradford and so on, where there are communities that are here that do not integrate or
yeah,
mix with others. They do not
yeah,
seek to become part of a British way of life, whether it be culture, whether it be in terms of following rules and laws or whatever. And indeed, there are elements of British society now, it seems, that have almost been kind of infiltrated by Sharia law. And the fact that there are some parts of the Muslim community that think Sharia law in Britain should be a thing and indeed should trump British law. I mean, that's very much a thing, isn't it? Is that dominant now because we have been so tolerant, I guess? And I've got to say, Sean, is that because of the enabling, because of the kind of soft soaping of the church, and all churches, by the way, the
yeah,
Church of England and the Catholic Church, whereby they advocate this kind of fluffy, integrated, everybody's welcome, be an over
yeah,
liberal stuff all of the time, and it
yeah,
puts us in a place now where there's no discipline, if you like, around how British society should operate, as in British laws, British culture, and British traditions should come first. And frankly, if you come here from another country, whether it's the Sudan, Somalia, or the Netherlands, you should integrate and act in accordance with the laws, the cultures, and the society that you have chosen to come to.
I think that's correct. And I also think it's a consequence of Catholic teaching as properly understood that that's correct, which is the important point. It's the sort of thing that the Pope should be saying. It's the sort of thing, it's the sort of argument that the church has ceased to make. Instead, there's a danger of us sacrificing a live Christian tradition in this country because we want to be nice. And that's not good for anyone. It is not the duty of Catholics to be nice. It is the duty of Catholics to live in friendship with Christ, and to preserve doctrine as handed down and evolved through the centuries. And it is not for popes to selectively articulate parts of that doctrine without reference to counterbalancing parts
Well, and
of,
Sean,
of
do we think? Let me put this to you. And look, I'm a Catholic, but I'm not very much not a practicing one. I'm pretty agnostic, I think, when it comes
yeah.
to God and
I've
religion.
heard you say
Yeah,
that.
no, but seriously, do you think the church should butt out of political commentary?
No, no, and I think I don't think it should butt out because then politics becomes corrupt. I think if that happens,
Well, yeah, it's
but
too
I
late for
think
that. I think
one of
that ship sailed a
yeah,
long time ago, Sean.
that's true. I'm talking in ideal world terms here. No, I think the point to make is to be fair to him, a point the Pope made in that address to the Spanish Parliament, which is it is no good formulating policy of any sort as politicians unless you have a clear conception of Catholic anthropology, by which I mean unless you have a conception of what people are. And what people are is that they are objects of infinite value with a certain amount of dignity. They are not kind of fungible or transactional units in some liberal calculus, which is pretty much how policymakers treat them. So I think that politics and the church should be joined up in the sense that I think that politics and faith should be joined up. Um, but we are losing touch. Policymakers, even Christian policymakers or policymakers who say that they're Christians, are losing touch with the teachings about what human beings are and what human souls are.
Sean,
And
what? Sorry, mate. Go on, carry on.
sorry, no, you go on.
No,
I've
I was
entered
going to
the
say,
point.
do you know what irritates me about, if you like, doctrine from church leaders
Yeah,
of all churches, insofar as
sure.
how we should live and what we should do, is that you've got the
Yeah,
Catholic Church, which is one of the richest entities on the planet. You've got the Church
yeah,
of England, which is incredibly wealthy when it comes to not so much cash, but particularly when it comes to land and assets. And yet we get the Pope and the Archbishop of Canterbury decreeing how we should operate and think and work, particularly with regard to such things as immigration. But
Yeah,
they're checks that are written out by the church that they never have to bloody cash because
I
they
absolutely
never
agree.
help anybody themselves. So
I
there's a
absolutely agree
huge
with
dollop
that.
of hypocrisy here, Sean.
There is. I was street homeless and hostel homeless for 2 years not that long ago. And I used to have people walk past me on their way into church. I saw the hypocrisy firsthand, and the hypocrisy is very real. Um, so I can only agree with you there, Russell.
So are we saying
And
religion and the
but
church are
when you say
inherently
decree,
hypocritical?
yes, they are. And I think it's probably worth making the point about popes and infallibility, because I hear this a lot, that as Catholics, if the Pope says something, that we're supposed to go along with it. The doctrine of papal infallibility is very, very circumscribed. It only applies on extremely rare occasions and with the agreement of the rest of the relevant part of the church, which I take to mean that most of the time, 99.99% of the time, we don't have to believe what the Pope says and we can develop our own arguments. And if what the Pope says contradicts Catholic social teaching, then there's a problem there, because not even God can operate in ways that are contradictory. So popes certainly can't. So when the Pope stands up and says something, and you look in the Catholic Catechism and it says something else, or if he basically tipexes out what's been said before, then there's real cause for concern there. And this Pope has developed a habit of doing that, but at the same time, he's sacramentally sound in the sense that he actually, he some of the fundamentals he gets absolutely right, but sometimes what he says is worrying.
Well,
But on
Sean,
your
I'm
wider
sure.
point of hypocrisy, Russell,
Yeah.
I absolutely agree with you, because
Well, and,
the
and let me hit
church,
you with something else, Sean, before you go. And look, I hate to do
sure,
this, but also there's the small matter of all churches, particularly the Catholic Church and the Church of England, covering up child abuse over decades.
agreed. I agree with that. The church has behaved disgustingly over that, and it's not surprising to me because if I could put it in supernaturalist terms, the devil is always going to go after the church. Evil people, evil will attack the church, and evil will find its way into the church.
It's
And
just like
that.
politics, isn't it? Where the left attack the right.
Yeah, I suppose it is. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
So how
but
do, how do
yeah,
we how do you make that better? Again, I say this as a person that isn't very religious at all, but I do understand the kind of the moral compass that goes with religion and Christianity in particular. That's my expertise is limited, if you can call it expertise, to that of a Christian church nature because we live in a Christian country. But how do we change the perception of the church then away from this kind of Marie Antoinette kind of edict type situation, this kind of hypocrisy that the church now is known for? And how do both the Catholic Church and indeed the Church of England here, how do they press the reset button to get people back on side?
well, I'm not particularly interested in the Church of England resetting itself, because I think probably the best thing that could happen to the Church of England is that it's converted by the Catholic Church. I'm being flippant, but I kind of mean the point as well. I think the church has lost a lot of trust. With me, I fell out of love with the church for a little while over lockdown, actually, because that seemed to me to be a kind of systematic hypocrisy. At a time when people most needed to go to church and receive the sacraments, the bishops shut the churches down. And I still feel a little bit injured and a little bit affronted by that. I think the way the Catholic Church could move forward, and a lot of young people are getting interested in the Catholic Church because of what I mentioned before, because of its supernatural element. It's kind of, we have Eucharistic miracles, we have strange stories to tell. And I think it could make itself more attractive if it focused on all that
Yeah,
and was less concerned with appealing to modern secularism, would be my
yeah.
view. But that's a
Sean,
long-term
Sean,
project.
Sean, I could talk to you all day about this. I didn't even get onto the fact that if there was really a God, there wouldn't be COVID. But anyway, I'm joking. I'm glad I made you
No,
laugh.
it's a fair
That
point.
that
But it's handled, Russell, not COVID specifically, but it's handled in the Old Testament book of Job. So you can
Okay,
look
all right.
there.
Look, let's do this again. I think we should make this a regular slot, Pooch and Elena. I think.
Can I just say something, Russell?
Yes, sir.
Just say something very quickly. And it's that one Christian virtue, I think, is the virtue of friendship and the need to cultivate friendships. And a lot of people have noticed that you've been a good friend to Mike over the last few months, and I think I just think that was worth saying. So
Yeah.
congratulations on the show, and
Thank you very much. The whole Mike Graham UK Live thing is down to me. Far from it. It's definitely not.
Didn't go that far.
It's definitely down to Mike, Pooch, Charlotte, Elena, and the team here.
All of you,
And I
all
have
of
to
you.
say, to Mike Graham's fortitude, the fact that he can pick himself up and say, "Okay, I'm not done yet. I'm going to carry on," and end up as the kind of a man with a show and a channel that has then spawned this UK Live.
Yeah.
And obviously we're only day 3 in, but a man that, you know, this isn't particularly religious, but in terms of being entrepreneurial and tenacious, a man that now has a channel that is watched by more people than the place that he left. And frankly, has now got to, I think, what are we up to? 26 million views and about 165,000 subscribers. So if ever there was a lesson there, whether it's to entrepreneurs or to those of a religious nature, well, maybe miracles do happen, Sean.
People are going to think that was a planted point and that you told me to say it.
No,
You really didn't.
It wasn't.
All of that is true, and all of that is fantastic, Russell.
No, but thank you for saying so. Look, you are right. Whether we're religious or not, sticking by your friends, particularly when they need, you know, a bit of a kind of helping hand, a bit of a kind of shoulder to cry on, a crutch, whatever, is very, very, very important indeed. And so, yeah, friendship. After actually the most important thing, which of course is family, is super, super important. Sean, I've loved talking to you. Thank you very much indeed. The comments, as you can probably see, look, people love the conversation we just had over the last 10 or 15 minutes. And who said religion was boring, Sean, eh? Sean Walsh there, thank you very much. He will be back.
You did once.
I did once, did I? Oops. Yeah, well, but that last 10 or 15 minutes wasn't. Right, Sean, thank you very much indeed. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks for being on UK Live.